Welcome to the Kenyan student. Today we talk about the cluster points and let's get into it. So again, you remember us talking about the subjects when we were talking about the cluster subjects. If you have not watched that video, please just hold on, go and watch that particular video so that you come and we proceed with these cluster points because that is a very important aspect to build fast. Okay, so you remember these subjects, you remember how we were able to build the cluster subjects, and let's get to the cluster points. So what are cluster points? These are basically numerical values that will represent your academical performance in specific subjects relevant to your chosen course. Okay, and the purpose is that they rank and they compare candidates fairly for the limited university seats. And the context is basically that it is central to the Kenyan admission process via the CUPS, which is the Kenya University and Colleges Council for Placement Services. So you find that you have your marks here. These marks will go in and give us the cluster points together with the weighted scores. I know this is a bit of tricky for you to understand now, but by the end of this particular video, you'll be able to get to what we are meaning. So, how are cluster points calculated? I know you've heard of people talking out there and saying that, you know what, we actually have a formula to calculate these cluster points. You can actually be able to know your cluster points. But I'm of the opinion that you cannot calculate your cluster points from where you are for the next reasons. So, how are they calculated? Number one is that you identify the subjects required for your desired course. Okay. So if for instance you are doing law, you remember we're talking about the cluster subjects, we said you need English or Kiswahili and then any other four, right? If you are doing medicine, we said you need chemistry, you need biology, you need mathematics or physics, and then you need English or Kiswahili. Those are four. If you need things like a bachelor of commerce, maybe you need mathematics alone and then any other for best, etc., etc. So that's the first thing you identify. That one you can do. That is very good. From there, you apply the weightage assigned to each subject. Now, this is where we draw the line. What is the weightage? The weightage basically is the exact marks you got in a particular subject. Now, you see these two diagrams here. These two screenshots are from the COOPS portal. These actually are real marks, real cluster weights of a particular student who we've hidden the identity here. Okay, so you can be able to see this student got an A minus of 80 points, and in English he had an A plane. But behind this A plane, there is a weight, there is a certain marks. Maybe it is 85 marks. I mean 85%, or maybe 90%. That is the weightage. And unfortunately, you don't have that information with you. So you cannot be able to calculate those cluster weights. Okay. That thing is to sum the weighted scores to get your total cluster points. That is the second reason why I believe you cannot calculate your cluster points from where you are. Because once you are able to get those, for instance, you can be able to see this screenshot once more. So when you open your portal, maybe when it is opened, if at all it is not opened by now, when it is opened, this is the first thing that will meet you once you get to that particular portal. You'll first of all see your grade here, and then you will see these degree cluster weights. So these clusters are divided into courses. For instance, cluster 1 is everything to do with law. All courses under law are under cluster 1. For instance, in cluster 13, all courses under medicine, may it be veterinary medicine, may it be pharmacy, may it be medical lab, all of them are under cluster 13. Okay, so what happens, for instance, if it is cluster 1 and let's take law, for instance, you need English or Kiswahili, you can be able to see this candidate has a very high cluster point of 43.850 because English or Kiswahili, either of them, this candidate had a A plane. That was very good, and you can be able to see it is reflected here. But when it comes to the medicine, in as much as he still has a higher cluster points, in this case, you will see that biology, which is a mandatory, and chemistry are slightly affected because they are not A planes. So that's why it is slightly lower cluster points. So that is why you cannot create your cluster points. Okay. Now, what is the role of those cluster points in COOPS admissions? What is their role? The first one is ranking, because students will be ranked based on that on their cluster points, and I think that is a clear point. Number two is that we have what we call cutoff points. Now, each course has a minimum cluster point requirement. These cluster point requirements are the ones that will give us the cutoff points. Okay, and again, subject combination must meet specific subject criteria for the course. Now, let me take you around this particular figure here. This is one of the documents you will find in the KUPS portal once they open that particular portal. And as you can see here, you have cutoff. So these cutoff are out of the competition. Okay, so let's say you want to do law. I'm giving these examples because they are common to everyone, and at least majority of people understand these courses. You want to do law, or let's take even this example. You want to do actuarial science, and the cluster subjects for actuarial science are, for instance, maybe there are two, maybe mathematics and physics. I'm just giving an example, right? So when you get mathematics and physics, those are a must. Maybe you must attain an A plane, for instance. And let's say you've attained those A planes, and then they pick other two best performed subjects to make them a cluster subject. So four, right? So once everyone has those four cluster subjects, you will all be grouped together, and then you have a competition. So that competition is what will give us a cutoff point. Okay. So for instance, in Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, this particular course, the cluster point of the last group in 2023 was 18.831. So anyone who had below these cluster points cannot be able to do this course in that university. That situation gets a bit trickier in the University of Nairobi because the cluster points are a bit high, or the cutoff is a bit high, 39.531. So anyone below 39.531, even with a 0.001, cannot be able to do this course in this particular university. Let's give it a more better example and a more clear vision here. So you remember these cluster weights, right? This is what you first saw in your portal, right? Let's take an example of law once more. In C, in this you have 43.850, right? So perfectly done. You have done a very good job. Then the second thing you do after you see your cluster, you go to the at the table that shows this particular degrees. And when you come here, you actually start looking at the cluster weight at this particular, and this is in 2023. So you look at the cutoff points, and you actually see, oh my goodness, the highest cutoff point is 42.014 and is for the University of Nairobi. But what is your cluster? 43.850. So that means that you are above the cutoff point. It means that you have already qualified for this course. And if you hit if you select that course, you automatically get it. And you can see what happened here. So this candidate decided to, I want to do this law. So he went and applied for law, and you can be able to see the cluster points are these, and then you can be able to see in 2023 the cluster point was 42, meaning that this is higher than these cluster points, and that way this candidate was able to get this particular course. That one I can confirm for sure. The reason why in 2024 you see there is a gap here is because they are waiting for you. If you're listening in 2024 and you are a candidate who did KCSE in 2024, to get in your results, you compete, and then you derive the cutoff point for this year. So this basically is the example of what will happen and what cutoff points and cluster points usually assist. So in summary, cluster points are basically yours. Okay, these are what you have gotten. They were your cluster points, but cutoff points are after the competition. Well, I know sometimes you are curious. You can be able to see there is a bit of 0.00. Whenever you open your portal and you find that there are clusters which have a 0, it means you cannot do that course. You cannot do that course whatsoever, simply because you don't meet the minimum requirements, or you did not actually do a very important cluster subjects. For instance, maybe this might be uh, engineering, and you failed to do physics, which is a mandatory subject. You'll find that in this cluster you have a 0.00, meaning that you cannot apply this course. You cannot even be able to take it to your course basket to try your luck. So that's what it means when you get this 0.00. Okay, so of course, finally, those who are still in high school, you can maximize your cluster points by ensuring that you know your course requirements and you focus on those high impact subjects. If you want to do medicine, focus on those subjects, get those A planes, because if you want to go, for instance, to University of Nairobi, you need to get those clean A planes in those cluster subjects, and so forth and so on. For those who are still applying, don't worry, because we are working with you this journey, and we're going to be issuing you a full video on how to go about this application process. Okay, therefore, finally, My good friends, don't forget to subscribe to the Kenyan Student so that you can get more insights such as these and for many people to be impacted by this work. Thank you and best wishes.